Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the August meeting of the North Bay Electric Auto Association. Yeah, get into the right context, which I always get wrong. And our meeting is the same pattern as usual, and I'll be giving a presentation today on California Air Resources Board's Advanced Clean Car. And this is actually ACC 2, I think. We start with introductions. Who are you and how do you get around? And I'm Gerry Glaser, and I get around right now on my Nissan Leaf, and I'm looking for a different car, and I'll bring that point up when we get to one of the slides as well. Cecilia, unmute, because Woody got pissed off that you're always last. So you have to go next.
All right, I'm Cecilia Sullivan, and I drive a 2018 Model 3.
Yeah, and she's been working hard on our web page, and it looks brilliant, and hopefully it's going to be published soon, and we'll have the new capability. Maybe next meeting you can do a review of what it's going to look like. Okay. David Heathcock, thank you very much for jumping in first. This is how I can tell if I've screwed things up on the video. Next.
Don't count on my help. I don't know anything about this stuff.
Yeah, but you at least show up.
I'm still driving my wife's 2007 Saturn Vue Hybrid. The Avani is, I would say, within a week of turning the wheels. I'm hoping, unless I do something really stupid, which is possible.
John Pomerley.
Yeah, I still drive the Geo Metro with a Leaf conversion, and starting to do a little progress on getting my truck back in order.
All right.
So we'll have a Leaf drive in it. Anyway, that's cool. I actually drove a very short distance, a Model 3 on Friday. The shop got a hold of one that had some damage, and so.
Oh wow!
And it didn't go to Tesla. It went to you guys.
Yeah,
that's bizarre. Okay, Mike.
Morning, everybody. Mike Gould. I am still driving my 2011 Leaf, and for longer drives, we take our 2020 Kia Niro. So no troubles with the Niro this month.
So, and that's a 2020 all-electric Kia Niro, right?
Yeah.
Caleb.
Yeah, I have a 2015 BMW i3, which I occasionally take out. I actually went to my office this week for the first time in several months.
Oh, you shaved this morning.
Yeah, well, maybe a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we have a Honda Odyssey for our children, so we take that on our longer trips.
Al. Oh, you're on mute, Al.
Thank you. Al Petaluma, driving an iPace.
Okay, that's all you want to say?
Looking at a Polestar, too.
Okay, all right. Brad.
Yeah, my name's Brad. I drive a 2004 Honda Civic Hybrid, but I'm hoping to get a electric vehicle at some point.
Well, when I give the presentation from ACC, you'll see some things that might be options you care about, because there's a focus on making sure everybody gets an electric, making it easier and easier. Bill.
Yeah, I'm Bill Baldavich. We still have our 2016 Kia Soul, Aretha, and now they've made a movie about Aretha.
Oh, wow.
No.
David Harris, sorry.
Yes, I'm trying a new venue here. I'm on my roof.
You're on your roof, and you know, you say your background's a great background, but you actually have a background.
Yes, this is real, right? I have a low slope roof, which I just go out the window on the half story, and the deer can't eat what I plant up here on the roof. So we've got a 2020 Nissan Leaf down here in the driveway and a 2017 Chevy Bolt.
Okay. Tor, you just jumped in.
Yeah, hey, let's see. Driving a 20, what is it, a 2020 Bolt, and riding my bike a lot. Thanks.
All right. And that's everybody I have on the list here. I don't see anybody else on up here right now. So we're a little short on folks today. Chapter business. Thanks to 4 of you that renewed. I did not update the screen, so this is about the same, but 4 people came back and renewed their membership to the EAA. There's a national or meeting again coming up this month. I'll see if I can get to those. They're kind of boring though. To remind everybody, keep sending articles that you find that are interesting and send them to nbea-team@googlegroups.com. I do send a message out, and I will right after this meeting, that you can just reply to. That'll organize them all. But if you just send it anyway, it'll get there. So whoever's doing the program next time, Sonia did the last one. She may do the next one as well. And we look at what shows up in the Google group to determine what articles to add. But find a speaker, find a video, decide to do something, talk on your own. Later on, there's one talk I'd love to see show up. Lowell's not here today. He was the one that talked me into doing a talk on batteries, and there's some new information on batteries I'd love somebody to do a talk on. And if nobody does it, I'll end up doing that talk too. Last time we had Tanya Nareth from the RCPA, a Regional Climate Protection Agency or Authority. I talk about what they're doing. And I just wanted to cover this. We thought we'd be returning to Thunderstruck, but the Delta virus has kicked in. The numbers have been going up throughout the country, actually going up in our county as well. So being on site didn't make sense. Even for me, I had a reading club that I visited with, and 1 week later, I hear from one of my friends, everybody was vaccinated. One was a breakthrough. So all 16 of us went out and had tests to make sure nobody else was impacted. But we knew of 2 cases already and a number of other people. So this has been difficult. I'm suggesting that we're not going back to Thunderstruck until we drop down to where the orange numbers used to be, and the numbers are going down and not up. Now, to remind you, orange was if there's less than 4 infections per 100,000. Right now, we're running at 24 in the county. Okay. Also, I'm suggesting, and I hope this doesn't bend anybody, and we can have a discussion about it, that when we do start meeting in person, that the only people who are vaccinated will be inside the building. John, how do you feel about that, since you're the inside the building? Yeah, okay, fine. It's your site, and you're in Brian's site. So, okay. Any comments on that? I don't want to just rush past that. Okay. EV events and offers. National Drive Electric Week for 2021 is coming up, and it is September to the first week of October. And the question I just wanted to get from you guys is, do we want to participate in some fashion? Does anybody have ideas? No one, huh?
Are there any events going on locally?
Not unless we do it. Not that I know of anyway. The one thing that I was at some car dealerships, and one of the dealers said, yeah, I mean, if you guys do something, we'll participate. And I'll tell you a little story when we get to one of the slides here. Okay, think about it. If somebody has an idea in the meantime, we have kicked around various ideas before for Earth Day and other things, but we haven't acted on it. And
Gerry, have you heard if any other groups are doing? Because it's, I guess, still would be mostly either an online or social distance event kind of thing.
well, there are some drives and some other stuff that was being done. I saw some articles, but I haven't tracked them really closely.
I guess the big issue to me is just, we used to try to do it to get people to drive.
Right.
And whether that's something we want to recommend or not, even though the dealers do it, just kind of.
Yeah, I'll cover that a little bit too. I got a slide on that because I had a strange experience the last month.
The dealers do it with nobody in the car. They just give you the car. They don't.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They have you sign a couple forms, but yeah, that's the way it works.
Oh, okay.
How hard would it be to have just like an outdoor car show get together with people with electric cars and invite dealers? I mean,
Well, it requires.
you don't have to
organizing.
have formal things and tents and all that. I don't know.
Like a meetup.
We
like-
continue down here. We continue to have live like car shows and events every weekend. They haven't seemed to put a restriction on any of them yet. There's one that is every Saturday that brings 2,000 cars to a location, and it's all outside. But Polestar actually sponsors the event, so they always have a couple cars there. But it's still going consistently. They don't drive them, but it's available. So.
And Mike knows how difficult it is to put these things together since he did it once. And I think it requires a group to say, hey, we're going to do it, and then organize it. So that may be difficult with us all virtual these days. Into the news. Somebody sent me, was it you, David? I can't remember. Somebody sent me a Sandy Monroe video, which I watched all the way through.
Yeah, but I think that was he's talking about what might happen and stuff. But
right, and he maintains that worldwide will cross 70% of new car sales will be EVs by 2028. That's only 7 years away, really 6 years away. And this is his slide from the video. Now, I've posted the video on our video links at the end of our presentation here, if you want to go watch the whole video. To bolster what he said, trying to buy or rent at least a new car, I went to Nissan, Volkswagen, and Kia. At the Kia lot, Dan was really nice. He knows most of you guys. And he says everybody in the club has been very supportive. They don't have a single electric vehicle on the lot. And he said, as soon as they get here, they're out the door. And while I was standing there talking, his manager runs out and says, oh, there's one on the dock. You can lease that one to him. Okay. He thought that this month, the 2022 Kia Niros will start showing up. But as Caleb would probably tell you, finding chips is difficult. So it's kind of hard to believe that cars can start showing up. I went to Volkswagen. They had 2 of the ID4s on the lot, but I couldn't test drive them because they didn't own them, but they could let me sit in them to look at what they look like. So
you should test drive.
Yeah, well, and I just got this morning a message from Charles, and he said, hey, I got one that you can drive. You want to schedule a time? And since I have a Nissan, Nissan said, well, we'll get you one of the 64 kilowatt hour 2018 models, basically the 2021 models, but it's not much of a difference. But we don't have them yet. And so then I said, let me extend my lease. They don't want to extend the lease because they want the cars because they want to sell them because they need cars. EVs are going out so fast.
Okay.
There is one vendor who's got a lot of cars, and that's Polestar. They're trying to get rid of their 2021s sedans, which I mean the Polestar 2, which is a sort of a sedan crossover. And they got very attractive lease rates, extremely attractive lease rates. And you can do it all online as far as checking out the pricing and configuration. And they've got them down in Corte Madera in the store, like Tesla store down there. And they've got 2 out and back you can drive by yourself.
I'll check that one out. But anyway, what I found is interesting. Ray's not going to join the meetings anymore because he said the club has achieved what it intended to achieve, that electric vehicles have become what everybody will drive. And also, I think Ray at 99 is getting tired sitting in front of the video. The Biden administration is tackling the future. They've already strengthened the mileage standard starting in 2026 to 52 miles per gallon. They're targeting 50% of new car sales by 2030 to be electric, which GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, I don't want to use the new name, all supported. The UAW supported, but they're concerned about jobs because it doesn't take so many people to make an electric vehicle as it does a gasoline-powered vehicle. And this is all their support's all contingent on Congress passing funding for new charging networks. They're proposing adding 500,000 stations and expanding the grid. I believe it was Volkswagen who also is planning on installing 500,000 stations. So we've got the government doing it and Volkswagen doing it at the same time. And the rationale is save the planet, reshape the industry to compete with China, which is a big thing for Biden. We need to be competing with China. If you want to keep doing the old stuff, then you eventually won't. And to foster domestic battery production capability. We don't make very many batteries here in the States. I mean, except for Tesla doing their thing. And on the right, I picked up a couple of graphs from another presentation talking about here's the plan, but here's what we actually need to do if we're to accomplish the goals that everybody said we need to accomplish. So there's one ramp that says, this is what we've implemented so far. This is the ramp we actually have to do. I thought that was pretty interesting to see. Yeah, John.
I'm just going to take a moment to say something I've probably said before, but when I hear about this concern about jobs, I want to express this thought. I think that's already been said, but that I wish, and I'd like to figure out a way to get the idea into lawmakers' heads that with electrics coming in, manufacturers can open up an entirely new division, which is, in fact, by requirement, to receive used vehicles back and to repurpose them as new repurposed vehicles. In other words, take the whole chassis back, redo the battery pack if they need to, paint things if they need to, and sell it again for cheaper. But it seems to me to be a really good idea for manufacturers to start thinking that way, partly for renewability, but also because I think they can make a better profit on a car that's just needs to be tuned up,
Hang on to the thought. In the presentation
Okay.
I'll give, I have some things to say about that because the state of California is thinking about that.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Right? Where do other countries stand? The end of the road for electric vehicles. So Norway, gasoline powered vehicles. Norway, 4 years until no more gasoline powered vehicles. Denmark, 9. The United States, where's the United States? Oh, we're not there. The 3-4 most important countries in the world to address, it's right there. Japan, US, China, and India are the 4 countries that comprise the most vehicles, and it needs to be addressed. It's 28% of US emissions. I just saw something recently. It's much higher in California. In our county, 70% of emissions in our county are vehicles. So we're one of those exceptions. And somebody else sent this to me. Anybody remember? Maybe Brad, did you send it to me? Yeah, you did. Okay. That the title I gave is EVs continue to not be news. Basically, this was a consumer report on vehicles, and they spent most of the article on vehicles, on EVs and what was happening with EVs. 100 new EV models to be released by 2024, with lower cost models than gasoline powered by that point in time. And here's the roadmap for each one of the different manufacturers. Now, one of the ones I find disappointing is Toyota. They're going to introduce their first electric BEVs in the United States this year, but I don't think any have arrived yet. But they are selling it in China, and they said they're trying to figure out what to do, since they believe that hybrids and fuel cells were the way forward. But the others are pretty amazing. And Shell continues on the electric road. They plan to install 500,000, oh, that's where the 500,000 charge points by 2025. And 2.5 million by 2030. They're going to be the electric fuel station. They want to stay in the energy business. They want to leave the oil business. And they signed some strategic, this is an article about them signing a contract with right-sized vehicles, basically scooters and bikes for charging stations. And they are now offering renewable energy for residences and businesses. I don't know how they're doing that or where they're doing it. And they published the largest charging network in the UK. Now, it used to be the oil companies would buy these things and then kill them. Shell's buying them and supporting them. And 350 is here, and Alan said that he'd be joining the meetings, but he hasn't. He kept looking for his 350 kilowatt charge station. Well, okay, it's right down there by Whole Foods in Santa Rosa. So you can charge at 350, or they have 4 350s, and they have 200 kilowatt charge stations in place. And then we've got Tesla structured battery. And that's actually YouTube on their presentation on their battery. There were questions about what happens when you're in an accident. Does that mean the car is done if you crush the frame because the battery's there? They are relying on the 4680 battery cells, and they expect that will reduce the weight of the vehicles, the cost, and increase the range. And they're ramping up the production. They expect to be in volume production in 2022, and both the Model Y and the Cybertruck will be coming out of Texas using those batteries. They're trying to get the cost of the vehicles down to $25,000 without rebates. And this one, and Tor, I have to tell you, Dina got me started on all this stuff. I've been looking at coolants. Caleb and I had enough experience with coolant leaking out of just about every vehicle that we worked on because of the way the connections are done in vehicles. Recently, Dakin has introduced something called a D1V140. That's a blend of 2 different coolants. And as a result of it, it has a global warming potential under 1. I mean, it's less of a global warming gas than carbon dioxide. And it works well for cooling in warm climates. It's really targeted for heating. And one of the things that occurred to me was the temperature at which vaporization occurs for different coolants happens at different places. And some coolants may be good for heating and some coolants may be good for cooling. Because you have to target the ranges. So heat pumps go in both directions. So these guys are all scrambling to find out what refrigerants do we need to have now that'll satisfy all the new equipment. And these filed a patent. And one of the things I learned about, I never thought of coolants being flammable, but this is only mildly flammable. Some of the other ones are not flammable. Now, up in the upper right-hand corner, I put down R134A is the most common coolant. That's a global warming potential of 1430. That's worse than methane by orders of magnitude, like tenfold. The one which they think is good is HFC 152A. That's 124 times. And there's another one out which is 4. So I expect to see a whole bunch of different things occurring. And later in the presentation, I'll talk about where CARB's going with it. Their fall meeting will have a focus on air conditioning in vehicles and coolants in vehicles. Who sent this one to me? Tesla's tackling the grid. Anybody remember? Maybe it was Sonia. I know from somebody who used to work with Caleb and me, she worked on the Australian projects. That was Kim. Worked on the Australian projects trying to do peaker plants using Tesla batteries. And Tesla built a ton of them and made major power plants now and really storing. And they're now coming and trying to do the same thing here in the States. And they want to be able to respond to RFQs by the utilities for peaker capability without using gas powered plants. Electric airplanes. I keep getting these as well. The guys in Hollister believe that by 2024, they're going to be in service with their first electric airplane. One of these, the one in Hollister, is 19 passengers. They're using a fuel cell for powering this one. That's the one I think on the top here. And then the other one is a whole new ground up design. And with a new motor design, they're using the Magnix motor, which is a clean sheet design on motors specifically for aircraft. And it's 9-seat with a cruise at 220 knots and a 440 nautical mile range. That allows us to get to Los Angeles with a reserve that's required. And then Surf Air. Anybody know Surf Air? When I was commuting between Santa Rosa and Foster City, I was flying and using a good amount of gas. The guys who are always in front of me was Surf Air, because they have shuttles throughout the West. They have also in other places too. They run usually Pilatus or something like this, the Caravans. They just ordered 150 hybrid electric airplanes. And the reason for it was to reduce cost by 25%. And those are going to be delivered shortly. So the hybrid engines now for aircraft are just starting, light aircraft are just starting to show up. All right, input from the peanut gallery. Anybody want to discuss anything before I jump into the presentation?
I had a question, Jerry.
Sure.
The slide you showed with Tesla installing batteries and making them sort of prepping for a virtual power plant kind of request from California. It'd be interesting to dig more into that, because that just sort of shows a sign when the utility started. I think there's some pilots right now with SoCal Edison, Glendale Water and Power, and some others in California that are starting down that route with Sunrun and maybe somebody else. But it just kind of demonstrates that the utilities are getting serious about integrating and utilizing customer-sited batteries and renewable systems. So I just put like a request of like learn more about that as we go forward at future meetings.
Yeah, and I've been looking at, I have multiple friends now. In fact, I'm meeting with somebody on Tuesday who wants to know more about Sunrun. I don't know that much about Sunrun, but they wanted to ask about solar. Sunrun responded to RFQs and was awarded the contracts with Con Ed in the East Coast. And the way they did is exactly what Tesla's now looking at. So I think Tesla's trying to pick up on the Sunrun model, saying, we installed enough batteries. I want to write a contract with you now that I can take power from your battery, put it on the grid if I have a call for power on the grid. And they'll do a certain amount. And that's what Sunrun has in their, I just finished reading one of their contracts.
Right. I think it'd be interesting to learn the details, because from the customer or homeowner side point of view, I think somebody at the California Solar and Storage Association was sharing that they'd seen a contract, offered to a customer residence that looked a lot better than if you're just buying and owning it completely without this sharing of the battery storage with the utility. And then there's a big question. So that's intriguing. How much less? What are the terms of ownership? And then what sort of credit do you get on your electric bill above and beyond what you may be getting for net metering? So that just sort of, that just looks interesting from both sides, from the customer side and also utility side.
Yeah, and for all of you, Tor and I will talk about this some more. We're both working on an energy group. I actually dug more into it, and I can tell you what the contract looks like and how it works. And it's not on the utility bill; it's different.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, David.
Has anybody read the July, August issue of Car and Driver? It's probably half the magazine. I didn't count the pages, but half the magazine is on electric vehicles. I was
Wow.
really, I mean, that for Car and Driver, a magazine like that, and it's very involved. It would be excellent for somebody that doesn't know anything, but it's also excellent for people who do know things. I learned a lot about the new battery packs, I think, in the Chevy GM cars or something, and what they were doing. But they had a whole bunch of art. I was really shocked that they're doing that much of it on it. It's a good breed, though.
Yeah. I forgot where I saw it, and I forgot who it was. And maybe it was back on one of my slides here, where GM's battery packs, they're actually supplying one of the Japanese manufacturers now too, as a full pack, and they're designing around the GM. So you're finding that the automotive manufacturers are following Tesla's lead and becoming battery manufacturers as well. Volkswagen's doing that and building multiple plants. I forgot who. Oh, BMW recently said they too. The reason they've been slow. I'll show that next month. I have that for an article next month. The reason they've been slow in introducing their electrics is they wanted to do it right. So they're actually inventing their own battery as well, chemistry wise as well. So it's an expansion of all those businesses. Yeah, John.
Go ahead, Caleb.
The two things that I saw, one of them is today, is that Tesla has completely sold out of all their 2021 Model Ys. That you won't see any new Model Ys on the road from them until 2022 at this point.
Wow.
So the supply chain impacts are definitely catching up with every one of the manufacturers.
And those new ones will have the new pack in them.
That's the intent. They still haven't refined it to the point where they think they can do it, but as Elon says, we have a backup plan.
John? Yeah.
Yeah, well, back to that, you don't have to go to the slide, but when you're talking about Shell moving to, and being an energy company, I think it's pretty exciting. I'm curious to know, given the whole grid cost for oil refineries and the question of whether, people keep asking, oh, where's the electricity going to come from? And it'll be interesting to know what Shell does and how they promote that when they start turning off refineries.
Yeah.
Where that electricity is going to go, and if it's coming from coal-fired plants, what are they going to do with the loss of income? It's just kind of interesting to see how that's going to trickle back.
Again, I keep asking if somebody else wants to do research and do a presentation. One topic that came up over 2 years ago, which I was intrigued by, but I didn't dig into, was how much electricity is used to make a gallon of gasoline.
Yeah, that's the point.
And it's the largest battery bank, the two largest battery banks in North America are at 2 Shell refineries to support running the refineries and keeping their electricity costs down.
Interesting, yeah.
Okay, so it would be interesting to see how that all works out and whether, maybe the need for electricity drops as a result of not having the oil.
Well, totally. And it'll be a great data for throwing back at people who say, oh, you're just driving a coal-fired car, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm looking for a volunteer,
Yeah.
I've tried to find that information before, because I'd say maybe 40 years ago that sort of information was readily available, and now they don't publish anything. They really bury it, and for obvious reasons.
Yeah, Shell could use that as a promo,
Yeah, maybe they're just getting ready for the right time.
Yeah, maybe. David, yeah, you raised your hand.
Is there any studies or, I don't know, studies, I guess, where the turning point would be? With this new Ford Lightning thing, the F-150 pickup is just another example of you can plug your vehicle into your house and provide energy so it can go back into the grid. Is there a point at which suddenly we don't need all these power plants? You just take Nissan's talked about this for years, but is there a point at which those vehicles are so uniform that they're supplying enough power that you don't even need as part of the grid or the grid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just.
Let me get into the presentation some, because I know that actually California Air Resources Board's been thinking about all of these topics, which is really, I was impressed by what these guys have been working on and analyzing. I did talk about the DC Bell last time as well, and gee, when they allow us to do that, I'm installing that in my garage, because that battery backup off of my car is, that'll peak my place. All right, I'm going to head down the path of the presentation. It's me, and the warning is I have 78 slides following this one. All right. So this is I attended the update from CARB. I attended it was a whole day meeting where they covered what they've been doing, what they've been thinking about, what new regulations they want to put in place. And it was a workshop. Pretty hard doing Zoom workshops. But on Wednesday this week, they had an update with some summaries, and I've included some of that there too. And you'll see on the slides, which I picked up from the update, that I've tagged it. The rest of it is slides that came from them. The workshop's recorded, so if you actually want to see the workshop and the things that they covered, the URL on the presentation that I post is live, and so you can click on that and watch the video. And I asked questions, and for every question that I asked, I got a response. And later on, I got emails from the speakers asking if I wanted to talk to them. This was like 400 people in this meeting, so they're very serious about getting input. I just wanted to point that out in the beginning here. They pointed out that the manufacturers continue to comply with the ZEV regulations, but in reality, if you look at it, the lower curve right here is the regulations. This is what the manufacturers have been doing. Okay, so they're well beyond what the constraints have been that the state applies to the manufacturers. Manufacturers are accelerating faster with EVs and with alternative methods than what state has required them to do. And I'll cover some of that too. Part of the reason for their meetings in pointing this out was, we better raise the bar.
But a second, what's a TZEV?
Hang on a second. I know what that is. Just a second. I got to remember what it is now.
I was just wondering why the difference between the two lines there.
Transitional zero emission.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Okay, and because there's a whole, remember, the CARB's responsible not just for EVs, they're responsible for the air. And so they look at diesels, they look at low emission vehicles, they look at partial hybrid EVs, and they look at BEVs. They're looking at fuel cell, and they're looking at all of the alternatives, and they're pushing on every area that they can. Let me get a little further into this, and that might answer it and might not, John. So
the I can answer that T with the transitional EVs. So like Chevy Volts and the BMW i3s for the range extender, anything that has a range extender, those all qualify under that.
Yeah. Oh, which is interesting. When I testified back in 1999 in Sacramento, all the manufacturers, especially Toyota, was pushing on hybrids as being the right place in these TZEVs, or what they thought would be the only car that would exist in the future. This is their comments during that time, that the base is growing. 70% of car buyers said they would consider an EV. Imagine that 10 years ago. 25% said they're actively considering an EV. And they said education and experience is the thing that's making the change. They just picked some of the quotes, and we know these quotes already as to what the various companies are planning on doing. This shows electrification commitments throughout the world, notice the United States, but California is an exception. In fact, it looks like it's the only exception in the United States. But we've got Norway, we've got most of Europe, actually all of Europe now at this point has commitments as to transition to EVs. The emission cuts, well, we just saw on a previous slide that did happen already since the time that they had this meeting. We rejoined the Paris Agreement. And I think there's more than 174 billion for EVs. Here's the ramp and their strategy, and everything that a CARB measures after this is based on getting to 100% EVs by 2035. How do we do that? This is where we are today, transitioning to 2030. What do we need to do, and how do we keep it going from that point? And I think they think there's certain thresholds that will be reached. They continue. This is what they do. And this is an update, was a summary. Clean up gas cars. It turns out that even they have sessions on how long should you idle a gas car before you drive it in order to keep the emissions down. And they actually measure that. And then they specify for the manufacturers. They used to have a 30-second specification, but now they find out drivers leave in 10 seconds. So they're thinking of changing the specification so that within 10 seconds, your emissions must be this, because car emissions drop after they've idled for a short period of time. Standards for heavier passenger cars, which was ignored originally. And that's why there were so many SUVs that were marketed, because you could get around most of the emission standards by having an SUV, a pickup truck. Increasing the market share of electrics and improving them for all customers, and there'll be some more on that, and achieving environmental justice goals. They've changed the specification for what's a ZEV, and we'll see that shortly as well. That is, the cars that they say now you can't use a golf cart any longer as a ZEV. And in fact, you probably can't use some of the original electric vehicles as ZEVs. They don't count. Now, I'll explain that in a second too. And there was a whole area about environmental justice. As all of us who have enough funds to buy electric cars, we start taking the burden of the infrastructure for everything else on other people and those who can't afford to buy an electric car. And so there's an entire area that CARB's been working on how to make EVs available to everybody, regardless of your income bracket. That addresses used EVs and other mobility standards. This one I thought was an interesting diagram, just showing where the air quality is and where the breakdown is. And this gives them a lot of their focus as to what they want to do as far as GHGs and NOx. And I never thought of nitrogen oxide as being a major issue, but for them it is. Long-term paths. On this one, and I had to look up TTW and WTT. TTW is tank to well, and WTT is well to tank. So the total of it is, here's your emissions. The internal combustion engine is on the left. The third one over is battery electric vehicles. For 2020 and for 2030, what this all looks like. This one over here is NOx. This one is CO2 and CO2 equivalent. They have fuel cells here too, but it looks like battery does better. By 2030, fuel cell they projected would be a better option from an environmental standpoint. So there's the executive order from the governor, and this is their marching orders. And their goal then was, how do we achieve that? Now you got to remember, as a regulatory group, that's to induce all of us to do what needs to be done. And they covered low emission vehicles, zero emission vehicles, battery labeling, and a bunch of other things. We're not going to get through the entire presentation, by the way. So if you guys are interested enough, I'll do some more on it later on, or we can actually read some of this stuff too. They spent a long time on low emission vehicles. I didn't realize such things existed. There's 3 different categories: low emission, ultra low emission, and super ultra low emission. And they have different specifications for each one because they're different categories of vehicles. But the ACC has been around for a while and has been working on things. As in 1965, vehicles were emitting 2,000 pounds of emissions per 100,000 miles traveled. As of the standards in place now, we're down to 10 pounds. That's a 200-fold difference over over my lifetime, much less than my lifetime. And the other thing that they've decided to do is these calculations allowed the calculation on fuel emissions to include zero emission vehicles. So now their new standard says, okay, zero emission vehicles don't count in your calculation of your emissions. They're a separate category. So anything which uses fuel now counts. So the number is going to change. Again, some more of the definitions that they used. So there's a whole area in here which I didn't understand. I think of the credits as being something that we get. This has to do with manufacturers. Manufacturers are required to achieve certain goals, otherwise they can't do business in California. In 1998, it was you have to have 2% of your vehicles must be zero emission vehicles. That disappeared and is now changed. Because here it is at this point in time. Here's the requirement. As of 2018, 4.5% had to be. 2019, 7%. By 2025, 22% of the vehicles sold by any manufacturer selling in California has to be a zero emission vehicle. But then the question becomes, what's a zero emission vehicle? Until 2025, it qualifies as a zero emission vehicle if it can go 50 miles. And it has to have at least J1772 charging, has to charge at least 3.3 kilowatts. Doesn't have to have a cord with it. Whoops, sorry. And it doesn't have to have quick charge. And neighborhood electric vehicles have separate requirements and treatments, but they were part of ZEVs. Starting in 2026, they proposed that the minimum range for an electric vehicle is 200 miles. And they test that both on highway, a mixture of highway and local. J1772 still required, but the charging has to be at least 5.7 kilowatts. The convenience cord must be required, and it has to support 120 and 220. And that happens, both of these all fit in my Leaf except for the 200 miles. You have to have some DC charging capability. They didn't specify the standard. You have to have, well, it does have to be CCS, or you have to have an adapter for it. Now they're also talking about what's the minimum DC charge that you would take? How many amps would you take as the minimum? And neighborhood vehicles are no longer allowed as part of the ZEV credit. But then we start looking at the ranges and the range required. And here's the minimum required up to this point. Here's the ranges, and here's the medium range. That's the maximum range they're seeing in vehicles. Here's the medium range. So everybody's overachieving what the government has been specifying. That's why they want to increase everything. Or what was that last time? Yeah. So they're looking for a useful life, and they're going to specify the useful life of the ZEV and the batteries, minimum warranty requirements, and then service and data requirements. There's going to be a data requirement that the vehicle must tell you the state of its battery. How good is its battery? So if you buy a vehicle, it'll say it's at 100% of its capacity, or 90 or 85% of its capacity. And they must have a testing method starting in 2026. They want to standardize the DC fast charging inlets, and CCS is probably going to be it. And they also have a specification for the recyclability of the batteries. So the concept also is, John, this is where we get into what you asked about, increasing availability of ZEVs to priority communities. So they created something called EJ credits, environmental justice credits. Now these are added to your ZEV credits. So a community program is actually used ZEVs. And if you have a used ZEV, you get half a credit for every used ZEV that you sell. You get 0.4 credits for every partial, oh, no. No. Sorry, try again. Do it again. Not used. Community program. Community program means disadvantaged communities. I'll show you the next chart. But the ZEV one also, you get a credit. You get credits for having sold used ZEVs. Now, one of the problems with used ZEVs in California, and I don't know if I have it here, I'll probably have it later on a slide, is that used EVs are leaving California because they're getting better prices outside of the state. And so we don't have as many used EVs to offer. So here, this is the community program. If the MSRP for the vehicle, and it has to have an MSRP, I believe, under 50,000, 40,000 rather. I don't know why it's here. Oh, that has to do with the used one. That's right. It is complicated. So they count towards the community program. If the MSRP of the original vehicle is this price, then you have to discount it by that amount for a disadvantaged community in order for you to get the additional ZEV credit. So if you had a Nissan Leaf that was $40,000 originally, you must give $7,200 off on the used price. Oh, sorry, on the price of the vehicle. You have to take $7,200 off of the $40,000 when you sell it to a disadvantaged community in order to get the ZEV EJ boost. So you get another half a credit. So you get a credit and a half for selling it as opposed to one credit.
Who determines what's a disadvantaged community? Or how is it?
They had a slide on that, and I think it's actually a state specification, but I don't know for sure. It has to do with the income levels. Did somebody else jump in? Somebody know the answer?
I don't know the answer to that, but Gerry, before you move on, the comment you made about used vehicles are leaving California, where are they going?
Aha. Other states.
Yeah, but if we see other states, their uptake isn't nearly as high as probably as many used vehicles as there are in California. That still doesn't make much sense unless it was really like, I don't know, Washington or
yeah, Mike, I don't have the answer to the question. I think they probably covered it when they were speaking, but it's not on the slides. Part of it was that nationwide, 1 in 4 EVs, new EVs, is leased and not bought. And so after 3 years, they're now used ZEVs, and a lot of people don't renew the lease, or as I'm finding out, I can't renew the lease. They don't want to, they want to sell it. The guys here in California, when I talked to them about, I said, how about if I lease a used such and such? Actually, I talked to Nero about it, Kia about it. And he said, we're getting outbid. So at some point, it doesn't make financial sense for us, and the prices that are going out on the market, because when they get the vehicles back, they don't actually own them. The leasing company owns them.
Right.
And they put them up for bid.
Yeah, but I'm kind of agreeing. Even even if that whatever it was 1 in 4, 1 in 3 return leases are going out of state, that's a huge amount of cars compared to North Carolina that still doesn't have very many EVs at all.
So that is part of the reason that they're trying to find ways to entice the manufacturers to keep the EVs here, because they would get more credits as a result of keeping the EVs here. I don't know if the one,
Yeah.
the 10% is going to be a large enough number for them. But they did do that. They track, these guys were amazed. I was amazed. They track all kinds of things. Every time I thought I was going to make an objection, they had studied it and they had the numbers. I was really impressed. And I don't think I saw anybody over 35. So this is a young group that's really doing one hell of a job at the California Air Resources Board.
I put in the chat definition for disadvantaged communities, but in essence, it's defined as the top 25% scoring areas from CalEnviroscreen. So they're for areas with high amounts of pollution and low populations.
Okay.
And pollution they're talking about is like various different kinds of emissions and pesticides and toxins.
Thanks, Cecilia. That's good. I will save the chat when the meeting's over as well. And I'm trying to leave that because we have links and stuff that are always brought on those things. One of the numbers I picked up recently when I was doing some other investigation was 70% of consumers purchase used cars. And that's true in California as well. That's where I got interested in, John, your idea of repowering vehicles. But one of the issues lately with repowering vehicles is that what we saw in 2011, 2012, 2013 is no longer true for the batteries. The batteries are lasting longer and longer and longer. And Nissan now has announced that, and I think it's on one of the slides here, that their batteries will last longer than the vehicle will, the life of the vehicle. And they have the life of the vehicle being 12 years. Now, it may last longer than that, but the usable amount of the battery should be there. My 2018 Leaf is kind of demonstrating it. It still gets 162 miles per charge, which it got on the first day. And then they also identified you have to have an MSRP of the original vehicle being less than $40,000 in order to be qualify for ZEV availability for used ZEV. So they didn't want to get, they didn't want to support high priced cars. They were looking to support lower cost cars. And then also they just touched on refrigerants. And I only brought this slide here so that you know that coming up in the fall, they'll have another meeting focused on refrigerants. I'm finding this area really fascinating because it's a combination of physics and chemistry. And Dina Allen suggested that we should change our refrigerant systems to CO2. So I looked into that and I found out you need an entirely different system if you're doing that. It's not just the refrigerant. And in many of these, they require some changes in order to support the refrigerant. So the manufacturers are all trying to find a refrigerant that has all the attributes that they want, not flammable, low GWP, low cost, easy to maintain. There's a whole list of criteria that they work on, and works well for heating, works well for cooling. This last summer, there was a contest, I think it was a $5 million contest maybe, that Rocky Mountain Institute had for improvements in air conditioning. And they found 5 companies put forward ideas which will reduce the impact of air conditioning by more than a factor of 10. By the way, part of the meeting will not just be on what the refrigerants are. It will be how do we induce manufacturers to use the right refrigerants, because they cost more. And so they'll actually have specifications of what's required and what's incentivized. They covered plugins and what happens with plugins. Post 2026, to satisfy the requirement of being a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and getting credits for it, it must go 50 miles all electric. So no more 12-mile Toyotas. It's got to go 50 miles. And they have requirements. They cover
Here.
everything else. Yeah, somebody have something?
No,
And they can't use more than 20% of their EV requirement using hybrids. So Toyota needs to do something, as do a number of others.
oh, no. I know.
And there's a whole discussion on the manufacturers, because they're so far ahead of the requirements, they've been saving credits. And now CARB's getting concerned because they're saving credits. They may not achieve their goals later on. So they're expiring credits now, and they had a whole plan for expiring credits. That was one of the ones they sent back to me, because I talked about, why don't you just use inflation instead and inflate the value of credits so that they become less worthwhile going forward. And this whole discussion on how they were going to do that. They covered all kinds of costs, and they're cost sensitive as well, because they realize that consumers are not going to buy electric vehicles unless they find solutions. So they're looking for cheaper batteries and fuel stacks and fuel cells. They have a whole workshop on costs, trying to figure out how to drive down the cost in electric vehicles so that they go down below internal combustion engines. And then they just break down also, where's the cost show up for each one of the different kinds of models. They have projections for battery costs and where they're going. If companies like QuantumScape, a friend of mine just sent me another one, which was Freyr, which is using M24 technology from MIT and putting in large manufacturing facilities in Norway, with their main focus is reduce the cost of batteries. So it's not the hottest and greatest technology, but they're trying to figure out how to reduce the cost of batteries significantly. These numbers here that we're seeing, $100 per kilowatt hour, have been achieved in some places already. When they're talking about 63, we're down at numbers that people didn't think were possible. And they think that the fuel cell costs will go down as well. I don't know about the whole hydrogen infrastructure that is behind that, though. But they're continuing to push on it. Small SUV is 35% of the California fleet. I don't know why we all need SUVs. And here was an interesting graph on what the cost of, since SUVs were the predominant vehicle in California, what's the cost bump? So if you're doing a battery electric 300-mile range, the cost bump by 2035 they expect will be $616 over an internal combustion engine for an SUV. I think they're wrong for all the other projections. The other projections say that they're going to cost less. But you can see the numbers here. It's kind of interesting to look at them. I mean, the 2026 numbers look about where we are, but that seems wrong. In fact, I even think that 2030 is wrong.
Is that with incentives?
What's that?
Is that with incentives?
No,
or
no.
before incentives?
Yeah, I mean, the reason is, I assume it's not with incentives. The reason that it's not with incentives is that CARB is responsible for figuring out what should the incentives be. What are the requirements? What are the incentives? And so they need to do a cost evaluation to figure out what their track ought to be. And like I said, this is all a workshop. This isn't, we're telling you, this is what we think we should do. Would you please respond to us and tell us if that's the right direction? Should we do something else? Are we making the right assumptions? There's a whole bunch about towing and emissions from gas-powered vehicles. And actually, they have, oops, sorry. I didn't, you guys have been toying with your electric vehicles. I'd never thought about doing that. Next one, I'm going to get a hitch on just for the heck of it. So anyway, there's the package distribution, and then there's also the tech packages. I bought a tech package of mine, and they cover all what are the different packages people are buying, and I found it interesting. For the battery electric, there's a high cost for the cold weather package. Does anybody know what's included in the cold weather package for battery electric?
It's usually like heated seats and heated mirrors and a heat pump sometimes, but
Yeah, okay.
Well, also probably a battery conditioning for cold weather.
Yeah.
yeah.
I warned Sonia and a couple others that I'd be reading some of this because most of this I captured 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So I haven't looked at it. I looked at it last night when I added some stuff to it that I thought was interesting in the summaries. Oh, this one right here, transitioning to new technologies. They're concerned about bringing the independent repair industry into the fold. And think it was probably on a previous slide that I had where they identified the number of dealer repair facilities compared to the number of independent repair facilities. And the difference between them is almost like 100 times as many independent repair facilities than dealer repair facilities. So it's a major concern. Also increasing the durability and lifetime. So this is all from the previous presentation. You can see from the summary that was given on Wednesday that they've addressed some of that and said, okay, this is our targets. Oh, here it is, John, that comment. Oh, it will outlast the car by 10 to 12 years. So I thought at one time it would be great to put, new batteries in the cars. That was based on my 2011 Leaf. Today it's, not looking like a great move from a business point of view. And they're also specifying the powertrain warranties. You notice they did that with gasoline powered vehicles several years ago when it said may not require a tune-up for the first 100,000 miles. Does everybody remember that one? I think we're all old enough. You don't know that one, John? I remember when that happened because the next car I got said no tune-ups for the first 100,000 miles. And that was to reduce emissions. There we go. This is their this is what they want to have as a standard starting in 2026. 80% of its original battery capacity for 15 years or 150,000 miles. Well, that's interesting. Now look at this. Excluding batteries for traction power. So how does this go? Oh, 80%. Okay.
Why is the requirement for 15 years if the car's lifespan's only predicted to be 12?
It's a very good question. I mean, like I said, it's a workshop. You might want to send that one. And people ask questions like that.
My guess is that they have intentions of second life opportunities with them.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm looking at this, right? And then you have this. The health monitor is actually a good one because I don't know how you accurately can determine the health of a battery other than you charge it, you discharge it, and you see what the rate is that you discharge. Do you know, John? Is there any other way to do it?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, the manufacturers are doing this and it's not I think that there's a concept of internal resistance that changes over time for a battery. But from my, little playing around with it in my physics brain, it seems to me to be, as you accelerate, you're taking a certain amount of current and the voltage drops. I think that there's an equation that can be developed that says, is this voltage drop greater for the same amount of current than it was a while ago, or what we expect? So
Okay.
I don't know. I'd like to see that published. That would be really interesting to
Yeah.
see. In fact, if they're going to require this, then they should have a standard,
Yeah.
That's-
But different chemistries would show different things though, right? So. Oh, there it is. Oh, I was off. It's 5-fold. It's not 10-fold or 100. Okay, so there's 2,000 new dealers and 10,000 independent shops in California. And they want to address that, make sure those shops stay in business and that they're able, and you can go around the corner and have your vehicle be serviced.
Well, that means that they'll be having to deal with training and warranty allocation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Right, this is just recovering. And one of the things was it's difficult just showing the slides to you, and I can tell you what I remember them saying. Each person who was presenting has a narrative, and they're speaking the whole time. And the slide, they're not reading off the slide at all. So there's a lot more content when you go to the workshop that they're filling in. Oh, we tested it this way and we had this kind of experience and blah, 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 blah. And they may have the summary here, or they may not even touch some of the points on the deck. They were seriously impressive. Battery recycling, okay, which is part of their standard as well. And they're looking ahead because they've recognized something, that the ramp is just starting now. In fact, the reason that a lot of the questions were, well, why do you have this standard starting in 2029 and this one in 2026? And I said, well, if we start in 2026, then 3 years later, vehicles are off lease, and that's when we're going to have the used ones. And so if we try to do it earlier than that, then we haven't planned for it. So they're going through the ramp and they're recognizing how things are occurring. The recycling is part of that. Volkswagen too is building recycling plants already. They're building their battery plants and they're building their recycling plants at the same time. The mineral resources limiting the battery manufacturing has been a steady topic in the Storage X series at Stanford as well. It takes about 2 years to 3 years to build a battery factory. It takes 7 years to build a mineral refining factory. So you're going to run out of minerals. And that's why the recycling is really important. And we see a bunch of people jumping into that.
Could you wait?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was thinking another point about the recycling is that there's a certain inertia that, like you said, 5 to 10 years or whatever, there's a certain amount of quantity that you have to make it effective. You can't just recycle 100 batteries.
Yeah.
So you've got to have this huge inertia build up, and then people are going to start making money doing it. But the other thing I just wanted to emphasize, the battery reuse. Right now, I'm noticing in our industry with Thunderstruck, we are sometimes getting letters of cease and desist from manufacturers, battery manufacturers, saying you may not use this battery in another purpose.
Oh.
So sometimes we ignore that, sometimes we go along with it. But if this is happening, and so I'm thinking at some point there's going to have to be some legislation that says the manufacturer doesn't have the right to do that, or something, because it's really a really excellent use of used batteries is to put them into do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah, but you understand the reason for it. So it probably will have some caveats to it. You're a pilot, you own an airplane, and you recognize in 1984, they stopped making new airplanes because the liability was so high on the old airplanes that they couldn't afford to pay the insurance for new planes anymore.
Right, so the
Forever.
liability just has to be dealt with.
Yeah, liability has to be dealt with, yeah. Because you're using it for a purpose that it wasn't tested for, so you don't know what's going to happen. The manufacturer doesn't want to take liability for that purpose, and they're willing to take it for the ones that they test.
Yeah, and someone who's selling them as used needs to take that liability or whatever.
Okay. But the other thing was there is a supply of batteries which isn't coming from the vehicles, and they're taking them from cell phones, whatever else. So that's where a lot of these plants are starting, with the smallest batteries and getting the minerals out of the smaller batteries. So their mechanical processes are different than the mechanical processes might be in the future. And they just went back and basically said, hey, battery recycling on lead acid batteries is near 100% today. I mean, they don't show up in the dump anymore. And we used to ship them overseas, but now we've developed domestic capability as well. Those are the minerals that everybody thinks that we're going to need. So they're trying to recover all of those. And it says that those 7 are at the top of the list. By the way, the cobalt in some of the new chemistries is gone. That chemistry and the work with QuantumScape and a couple of others, they're trying to eliminate the nickel, because nickel's gotten very, very expensive. Yeah, okay. So I can't speak to most of this, and I'll flip through them. We're getting towards the end, believe it or not. Okay. There, that's probably part of it, John, what you're talking about. And they need some labeling on them too. You can use it for this. It works this way. Part of your battery thing will be this. You're going to have a C. You're going to try to use a C, which is much higher than they probably ever tested, right? A C rate. And so it may overheat, and then they'll worry about those things.
Well, the good thing about labeling, though, is that it's easy to promote it as with a certain C rating, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and we can include that in our warranty or whatever.
Yeah, well, there we go. It doesn't have the C rate on here, though. That's interesting. Maybe you should get in there, and I have a link, write to CARB and saying, if you're going to put battery labeling on here, why don't you put down the maximum C rate as well? Oh, requirement standard, manufacturer, chemistry, voltage, performance capacity. But performance capacity is kind of ambiguous, right? It probably needs to say, it should be, here's your C rate. And this is, I can't believe it or not, we're going to be early because I went through them fast. So this is their timeline. They have a fall workshop, and then there's a board hearing, and then the standards will be adopted. All right, that's the end of the presentation. I did 78 slides.
Nice, good question, Jerry.
Yeah, sure.
So just in all that, I don't know if you said it, but is there an existing lithium battery recycling facility here in California today?
Yes, there's one on the East Bay that I think was started recently. It's I don't know the name of it, but I remember reading about it because it was besides JB Strubble's in Reno. I think that there was somebody else also out of Tesla that started looking at recycling in the East Bay.
So, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at the lead acid model, I don't think it's required that they go back to the manufacturer.
No.
There's recycling facilities that take batteries from multiple sources. And, you always hear this things like, oh, we need critical mass for somebody to start a recycling business to make it financially viable.
Yeah.
But I'm really astonished that we have, lithium batteries are common in computers, laptops, phones, etc. Do we just throw that all in the trash, or is there because there's not a viable way to recycle it economically without some subsidy? And if that's the case, why isn't the CARB or some other entity supporting a facility to get started, so to help, you know, get through the trying to stand on its own kind of thing?
Yeah, you know, that'd be worthwhile looking into, because there's all kinds of different CARB money, and it's all earmarked for different different things. So
I
there
mean,
may be money earmarked for that as well. I mean, we just need to look into it.
I mean, the other example, I don't know. I know, for example, solar modules in Europe, sold in Europe, part of the cost is to help recycle it at its end of life.
And
Now, I
same
don't know
thing
the
for-
answer to the question. Is it going to some sort of industry-wide recycler, assuming the manufacturers? I don't think you can assume the manufacturers are going to be around except whatever modules. So I'd be interested. I mean, you could, they don't have that here in the US. You can buy, so there's millions of solar modules going in,
Yeah,
and there's many getting retired and just dumped. So it's a common problem for these electronics, batteries, solar modules, et cetera. And you'd think, or I would think, that CARB or some government entity would help
Yeah, Tor,
establish something.
I just Googled the question, and there's another department, the Department of Toxic Substances Control. And they have this article, how is California doing with recycling rechargeable batteries? So it's not CARB. You got to look at dtsc.ca.gov.
Yeah, but if CARB is going through this whole exercise of what sort of label to put on the battery, I mean, there's a connection. Maybe it's not their responsibility, but you know, we have so many government entities. It's like, who's in charge of what? Anyway, just the general concept of. I mean, I think there's one or two solar module recyclers in California, or one maybe, who's just trying to make a living of it because it makes sense. But you need the combination of either putting a deposit on when you buy it to help pay for the infrastructure of recycling it. Anyway, I'm just spouting. I don't know where to channel these ideas.
well, you know, you probably know that Germany, for it's more than 20 years, I think now, has required for multiple products that the cost of the product that's identified includes the recycle or the end of life
Right.
requirements for disposal of the product. And that was for cars and whatever else. I always thought that was impressive. They were thinking all the way through.
Yeah, something to learn there.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, just I probably missed it. Is there a difference in their mind in this presentation between, there probably is, recycling versus repurposing? And I'll give you a couple examples. There's a place right here in Fairfield that will take your batteries, and if it's lead acid or AGM, those kind of batteries, they actually pay you $5 to $10 for it, and then they send it probably to a recycler somewhere. But I took a CALB cell down there, and they said, yeah, we'll take the CALB cell, which is lithium ion, but we won't pay you anything for it. The other interesting thing was I was out picking up my powder coated parts for my new battery racks, and there was a little place down the center there, industrial thing, and it looked like a brand new place, and it said something about recycling batteries or whatever. So I just walked in and I said, what do you guys do? And they said, well, we repurpose batteries. Mostly, I think they were Nissan or a Leaf batteries. And I said, well, if I want to create a battery pack for my house out of repurposed batteries that work, will you guys do that? And they said, no, right now, I mean, it looked like a handful of young guys sitting around computers, and then they had cells out in the background there, little shop. We only do this for commercial customers right now, but we might do it for residential. So, you know, people are into all, I mean, this is like Fairfield, you know, there's like places that are doing that kind of stuff.
A friend of mine had contacted me about taking battery packs out of vehicles and then using them for stationary. And we looked into it. And there were two things that stopped us. one which he took care of. He had a group in India that was going to build the entire control system, because you need an entire control system. Then it has to be certified by the utility saying, okay, it does what it's supposed to do and it's safe for us at the utility. I mean, you've got frequency syncing and a bunch of other things that you have to worry about, as well as the crossover shutoff that occurs when the power goes down. But on top of that, it turned out that most of the manufacturers, Nissan was probably the first one, thought about this before they delivered the first electric vehicle and started thinking about how they would repurpose the batteries for stationary applications, and have had that on the roadmap. Volkswagen absolutely has it on their roadmap as well. They're building plants to make stationary packs. So it is being thought about at repurposing. Is it covered in the CARB? I didn't see it. All I saw was in recycling. So I think they want to make sure that the materials are getting used. And that we're not wasting the critical resources, being those elements that are constrained for mining and whatever. Tor?
Slightly further back in your presentation, you're listing a bunch of specs that CARB is saying about what defines a PHEV, et cetera, and the plugs and the capability of charging and all that. And I wondered, did you catch anything about the topic of bidirectionality, or, you know, for future vehicle to grid, for vehicle to home functionality?
In the word,
your
yes.
conversation?
In the words, it was mentioned. I don't remember it in the slides, because they absolutely were on top of it and said, you know, we think this is a key thing. We've got a major resource out here. Once we get to this level, we need to be tapping that resource. I don't remember it from the original deck. I can look through the I didn't give you all the slides.
Oh, thanks.
There are a lot more.
Well, so related to that question then is, and I don't know if anybody else here knows, is my understanding is there's whoever regulates the CCS protocols is working on updating that.
That's
to
SAE.
Okay, so allow bidirectionality. And what I don't understand is whether, when that comes to pass, whether existing vehicles with CCS plugs, one will be able to use, will be able to do that because the hardware is on the house, or is it also something on the car that will either allow or restrict it from working in vehicle to grid mode when that protocol is finally approved? Does anybody know?
Well, I'm at a computer.
What existing cars?
Somebody look up real fast DC Bell and see if it has a CCS connector on it.
I think they do. Actually, they do.
Because I think the CCS standard, the SAE standard, already addresses this, and it didn't several years ago, but I think it does now. Caleb, do you happen to know? Have you ever looked at it?
All right, just the way.
No, there he is.
What was the question?
And the question was, do you know if the CCS standard for DC quick charge includes vehicle to grid?
So it was in the proposed functionality from the CHARIN group that has been kind of drafting these, and I haven't looked back to see if it actually made it into the next release,
Okay.
but it was part of their original template that was going to be included.
So the follow-up question to that is if and when that does pass and includes that bidirectionality, would existing CCS cars, would existing CCS cars work in that mode, or would they require some sort of software or hardware upgrade, or is it all on the house device, the charger, or some combination?
I'm aware of only 2 cars that have built-in functionality which allows that. One of them is the new Ioniq 5 from Hyundai that allows output, but they actually put an inverter on the line so that you can actually get AC output. And then the other is, the heck was it? It was I want to say it was a GM product, and the system was built with the hardware to support bidirectionality, but you would need to put in a software upgrade to activate it.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Ford Lightning specs, and because everybody's like, oh yeah, you can run your house on it, and
Yeah.
220-volt outlet, kind of plugs, and so it has a lot of 110 outlets on it, 220-volt outlets on it in the front and the trunk, and
Yeah.
but exactly how they're connecting to the house, it says you can run your house on 3 days, 10 days, however you ration it. But the actually how, so it sounds like the hardware's there, and I guess the underlying story would be, are they just waiting for the protocols to allow you to actually do that?
Yeah.
So-
And the
Anybody know what
Lightning's a little.
VTL, anybody know what VTL is?
Mm.
I'm just looking at
is
the-
vehicle to load.
Vehicle to load?
Yeah, so like the
Oh.
Hyundai Ioniq 5, that's a vehicle to load system. So they actually have an adapter you plug in, and it gives you, I don't know, 1.5 kilowatt or maybe 2 kilowatts of output AC, but it's designed to go to, it converts it to like an outlet. So it's not like it's not meant to like integrate directly into your house, but you can put a power strip on it and run some stuff off of it.
Right.
Well, I just picked up an
Similar
article
to
here on the
Ford Lightning's the same way. That's been designed with, I'm not sure if it's an integrated inverter within their charging system that then outputs to those outlets throughout the vehicle, or if they have a dedicated AC inverter on their main traction battery. But it's the same idea. They're just putting a high-powered AC output on the truck rather than using like the CHAdeMO DC to DC, where they're relying on shore-based equipment to run the inverter.
Right.
I just looked up the Kia Niro for 2022 to see what it had on it. And it says here, we've heard, and this is from a May article, we've heard that the company went with VTL instead of the more common VTG because the software capabilities required off-grid connectivity weren't yet available. We're told that you can expect that EV6 to power anything a 2 kilowatt generator can power, and the spec sheet can do so for 36 hours. So it looks like it doesn't plug into the house, but yeah. Any more questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to point out we have the links here. Some of these are videos that I watched in order to pull some of the material together for the notes. StorageX continues to have really good systems. Messages. One of them you might look at, which I found really intriguing, and if I can get somebody to do a presentation, and it's on my next slide too. If you go there, there was a presentation recently by the CTO of QuantumScape talking about their technology, how they got where they are, where they're going, what their challenges are, and all of that. And that's in the StorageX series. Our next meeting will be September 11th. Online and in Thunderstruck. We don't know till we see the numbers, and you'll get a message from me to talk about that. And I really would love somebody to go look more at QuantumScape. And this is my own, somebody to do a presentation on, hey, here's that technology in some detail. We watched the video, but I think the presentation that was done at Stanford by their CTO was really interesting one. If somebody wanted to put together 10 slides on that and some other battery technology on what's happening with batteries, I'm going to do the same thing that Lowell did and say, hey, won't anybody do a presentation? But I'm looking forward for somebody else to come up with presentations. If you got a speaker for next time, that would be good too, because we don't have anybody on deck. All right. And that's all we got, guys.
I have a question to ask people before everybody goes. My daughter has a Chevy Bolt, B-O-L-T, and I'm curious if anybody has any scuttlebutt about what's going on with the battery recall thing, because they've reactivated it, and I just wondered.
I watched a video, trying to think, I think it was on EV transport. I'm not sure. I just happened into it. And they had one guy that went through all the steps that GM's been doing and not doing as far as the battery issue. And they started off saying it was a charging thing. Now that then they said it was a plate misalignment thing. And the guy actually said it would cost them X number of millions of dollars to replace all the batteries. And from a propaganda standpoint from them, they should have just taken it and said, we're going to replace them all. But they're claiming the new 2021 or 2022 batteries made in the US don't have the problem. So it seems to go back to LG Chem, but it was quite involved. I didn't even know any of that was even going on, but I can try to find that again, John, and send a link to you.
I'll add that I think, yeah, I read that. There was another story about somebody's bolt catching on fire while it was at the body
Yeah.
shop for some fixes. And GM wouldn't honor a warranty and some bullshit like that. But to your point, your daughter has a 2017 to 2020 Bolt somewhere in there, right? Another friend has one of those, and I think, you know, they've just offered some new software fix that they think will do it, and also not allowing, or still recommending you bump it down so you don't fully charge it, keep it at 90%. But yeah, the strange thing is that Hyundai, which had the same LG Chem batteries and were having some similar problems, they replaced all the batteries. They didn't have as many cars sold, so maybe or here in the US, so maybe it wasn't as big a deal. But yeah, GM could have replaced them all. They just decided not to. Is it safe? That's probably your biggest question for your daughter to drive around in a Bolt still. I don't, probably, but.
I think they're still
Question.
recommending leaving them outside or something, charging them outside, or don't put them in.
I saw that recently too. And it wasn't just for the Bolt, it was for lithium ion powered vehicles, that you shouldn't put them in the garage and you shouldn't charge them overnight.
What?
That's ridiculous.
All lithium ion batteries?
Yeah, I mean, no, it was in an article because of the fire danger. And I have to look and see if I can find where that article was. It was a serious article though.
Yeah.
Love to read that.
What is she hearing, John, from
Well,
the-
just from her experience, she got the first notice and it said, bring it in so that you can't charge more than so much. And then the alternative was to set it to mountain driving mode or something.
Hilltop Reserve? Yeah.
Hilltop Reserve, right? And so she did that, and then they said bring it in, and so she brought it in, and they did a software update, and then she was back to 100%. And then she got another notice that said that back down again. So
Yeah.
it just is. I mean, I'm not all that concerned really for the likelihood of it, but I'm more concerned for the effect it has on EV, the confidence between the EVs and the public.
Yeah.
Cecilia just posted a link on how to handle your Bolt with the manufacturer.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. I would echo that. I mean, it's kind of strange. I got a Bolt, upgraded Bolt lease, and then immediately the dealer keeps sending me these ads like I didn't already get a car to buy one of their other cars in the GM family that doesn't include a picture of the Bolt, and yet they're announcing they're all in for EVs, and I'm like, come on. And so I don't know, it puts a little question mark. Are they really? You start to doubt it. And then we're all, EV believers, but then if the manufacturers start shortcutting on supporting it, then that just kind of breeds more doubt. So anyway, yeah.
All right. That will be the end of the meeting, and I'll see all of you September the 11th, either in person or online again. I'll let you know.
Anybody remember 9/11?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
I got to double check. Do we really want to meet on 9/11? No.
Well, thank you, Jerry, for doing this.
Thanks,
Sure.
Jerry.
Like I said, if somebody's willing to do a presentation next time, or you have an idea for a speaker that we should contact or you should contact, let me know. We need somebody for next time around. Otherwise, we're just gonna bullshit.
Jerry, I have stopped twice at the Polestar down in Corte Madera, and I don't know, they act like they're willing to give a presentation. That would
Oh,
be
okay.
one possibility.
You know, you want to contact them and
It-
see if they're
it's not-
interested?
They're kind of a branch of San Jose. San Jose is their big operation. Caleb might have a better idea. What Polestar might do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Since they sponsor this car event, they definitely have a team that's set up to do outreach like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they would be interested in making a presentation.
Cecilia, I see your message in the chat. Are you willing to sign up for next month? And maybe you can also give a presentation on the website.
That's fine.
I'm not ready to commit to that just yet, but
Okay. That's fine. All right. Yeah, David, go ahead and see if you can get hold of Polestar. That'd be great. I'd like to hear about it. All right. All right, everybody. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you in a month.